Welcome to today's edition of the Career 100 podcast. Your host, Felicia Gopaul, founder of collegefundingresource.com, will be interviewing professionals each week currently working in one of the top careers. We want to expose you to the varied and distinguished careers of our guests and to perhaps inspire you into considering following in their footsteps. Or better yet, blaze your own trail. So sit back and relax as Felicia interviews professionals about how they came to be in the top careers.
And it's a great time to be in software engineering. Also now more than ever, we have tools in social media and otherwise on the internet that didn't exist 10 years ago, platforms to have impact and reach like millions of people at a time.
Hello, this is your host, Felicia Gopaul, host of the Career 100. We're continuing our series on the top 100 careers featuring the profession of software engineer. When I was at Berkeley, we had to take a programming class in order to graduate. It was interesting, but it was not what I was called to do. I have two girls who are taking their first programming class later this summer, so I'm always on the lookout for women who are working in male-dominated fields as role models for them to learn from. I'm excited to have today's guests. They're both software engineers at Facebook. In addition, they co-founded WoGrammer, where they interview different women engineers. The first person I'm going to introduce you to is Erin Summers. When she was a teenager, Erin didn't feel like she fit the mold of a typical computer scientist, and she started taking control of her story. She taught herself about robots and earned a BS in electrical and computer engineering, and also got a PhD in electrical engineering and computer science from UC Berkeley. She now works at Facebook and leads a team of developers who build ads for Android. Her co-founder of WoGrammer is Zainab Ghadiyali. She had a strong penchant for computers and always saw it as a hobby. She graduated with a BS in chemistry and spent a year in Berlin investigating the effects of PSTD and acupuncture. She followed that by working with the Foundation for International Medical Relief of Children, where she built business models for self-sustaining public health initiatives. During that time, she saw the importance of technology and how it improves people's lives, and she went back and decided to shift her focus to engineering. She's now also a software engineer at Facebook, and she is also the co-founder of GoodMate, an award-winning application, and WoGrammer. Ladies, it is a pleasure to have you on the line.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you very much for being here. So let me just kind of start with, I think inside of your bios, there's a little bit of a story for each of you about how you became software engineers. Could you tell us a little bit more of your story, please?
Sure. So this is Erin. As you mentioned, I started, probably the first programming class I took was in elementary school. I played around with Logo a little bit, and I didn't even realize what I was doing. It was just kind of like a fun game. And it was for this class that I went to. And after the class was over, I kind of dropped it. And then in high school, I was interested in building robotics. Just it seemed like really fun. I thought it was cool. And so I built a robot for my senior project. And that led me on to build more robots and learn more about software engineering and electrical engineering in undergrad. And then in my PhD, I found myself doing a lot more of the mathematics behind robotics and less coding. And while that was very interesting and very challenging mentally and rewarding in different ways, at the end of it, I was really craving wanting to be able to build something that many people could use, and cell phones were getting much more popular, and I wanted to build a mobile app. So I had this opportunity. I went to this conference every year that has 3,000 talks in 3 days and just a giant thick booklet where you were supposed to somehow manage a schedule through that, and it was screaming to be optimized. So I built my first mobile app by scraping the data for the schedule for that conference and building an Android app. And it was really awesome just sitting in the back of the room, watching people use my app, and even if it just optimized their day a little bit, it was very rewarding. And that kind of just pushed me into really wanting to do software development and working for a company where I can affect millions, billions of people like Facebook. So that's how I ended up where I am today.
Got it. Zainab, do you have a similar story, or do you have a different story that you want to tell about how you became a software engineer?
I think like every story is so unique, and like I think mine couldn't be more like different from Erin's. I think the thing that we both share in common is our passion for building stuff and engineering. I also shared the same passion growing up, and my first experience with computers was when I was in middle school. And during the summer, when there's like nothing to do, my mom encouraged me to take this computer science like programming class for the summer, where you could just go and learn like how to build games, and it was just like very interesting. So I learned BASIC, which is a kind of programming language, and I absolutely loved it. It was the best summer. I was so excited, and since then, like I've always like been excited about computers and programming. I never saw it as a career though. It was always like a hobby, because in my mind, like I had this stereotype of what it means to be an engineer. And I felt like, no, that's not my lifestyle. Like that's not the kind of environment I would fit in, because the image of an engineer, as I saw through the lens of media, was around this person who's very geeky, nerdy, like, not very social, very good at math, and just like sitting in front of a computer or a bunch of machines and trying to do something. And I felt like I loved working with people, and I wanted to do things that were more collaborative in nature. So I was like, okay, I like computers and that's my hobby, but that won't be like a career option for me. So I started exploring other career options like theater or chemistry, nutrition, went on to like go to grad school for a PhD in health economics. And that's when around that time I was working for this nonprofit. And I also saw firsthand, like you mentioned, the impact of how technology was changing people's lives. And I felt like if I had to do something impactful, then and at a scale where it reaches millions of people, then technology was the place to be. I still had the stereotype in my mind, so I thought, maybe I could be a consultant or like a program manager or something, until I came across a hackathon, which is a programming competition where you can build stuff, sometimes not necessarily software, but just like you build something. And I entered a hackathon that was sponsored by Facebook. I sat with the team. We ended up winning the hackathon. As part of that, I was invited to interview at Facebook. And I thought to myself, sure, why not? It'll be great to meet engineers and solve problems, which is the kind of thing I like to do. So I went for my interviews. And when I got an offer to intern at Facebook, I took a risk and I said, why not? It's just 3 months and I'll learn so much and I'll be in California and that's kind of great. So I came here and that's the first time I experienced engineering and I just absolutely loved it. And I realized that it's not an isolated field. It's a very collaborative field and it's actually a great vocation. So I switched my majors and I decided to then graduate with industrial engineering and computer science. And now I'm a full-time software engineer.
Perfect. I'm nodding my head as both of you were answering my question because, since I've got girls and I've only got girls, the fact that they are so young being introduced to technology and they just kind of grow up around technology. I think that that's really interesting. One of the reasons why I decided to put them in the course that I decided to put them in is because to break up that stereotype that he really kind of spoke to about the fact that, engineering is just for guys. They're fortunate because their father is an engineer, but, the way that I describe my husband is he's not the type of engineer that you think of as an engineer. He's not geeky. He's very personable. He likes to work with people and he's very collaborative. And so, a lot of the stereotypes that talked about is that the collaboration and the impact that you guys have in your position of being able to really affect millions of people, I think is really kind of very powerful. So let me just kind of speak to software engineer do. I know it's going to be very different at different places, but can you kind of give my listeners a little bit of background about what sorts of things software engineer does and what sorts of problems are they trying to solve in their positions?
Yeah, so I can walk you through like a typical day for myself. So I have a young family, so I like to get home for dinner. So I work pretty early. I get up around like 7 a.m. I head to work. I get to work by 8. I usually start my day by reviewing code for my colleagues. Every piece of software or code that goes into Facebook is reviewed by a peer. So I start my day by reviewing code, making sure that nothing's broken that I have to fix, and if it is, then fighting fires and making sure the most important stuff is being worked on, and delegating tasks to my team, things like that, and then actually writing code. As you mentioned, I work on mobile ads for Android. And I may have some meetings throughout the day with cross-functional people. I work with designers, other engineers, program managers, all about the products that we build. There's QA, there's a big cross-functional team, and we all work together. And, so that is basically my day-to-day. And then I leave work around 5. I get home and I have dinner and spend time with my family.
Got it. So, Zainab, could I ask you, are there any kind of myths or misconceptions about being a software engineer other than only men do it?
Oh, there are so many. I feel like, and like I said, media has a large role to play in that, because how many even sitcoms or articles can you think of where there isn't this stereotype of somebody who loves math, who's isolated. It's not even sometimes about male or female. It's just engineering in general. Even if there was a male character in a sitcom, if I ask anyone to close their eyes and imagine what an engineer is like, what would you picture? It's probably someone who's this geeky little person who's in front of a computer, or just very socially not very personable. And it doesn't matter whether it's a male or a female. So part of it is not just engineering is for guys, and I think that is true, but there is so much more to it, which is the person likes math or is super smart, has a super high IQ, and you have to be smart. But I think that's true for any field. When you're if you're successful in anything, you're smart, you're hardworking, you have all these other skills. So I don't think it's just oh, you have to be smart. There's also things around oh, you have to love math. You can love math and be an engineer, but you can also we just interviewed somebody who didn't like math growing up, and she is a software engineer. So it's not necessarily something which is a field where you absolutely have to love math. That's not the criteria. The criteria is that you should enjoy building things and problem solving. And that's far more important than any other fact, which is, or any other stereotype that's out there, which is, really high IQ, really loves math, is not personable, doesn't have a social life, I could go on. There's so many. But it could be anything that is, when I ask you to close your eyes and think of an engineer, what you imagine, that's a stereotype, and it's not true.
Well, because I can close my eyes and see my husband, I know that it's not true. But you're right. Prior to meeting my husband, my stereotype was very much that. And I think I kind of hold my husband as the exception as opposed to the norm. So I definitely understand. Erin, if you had the opportunity to go back and talk to yourself when you were just getting started, what would you tell your past self about the profession that you're in, knowing what you know now?
That's a good question. I think when I was younger, now that I'm older and I have more a body of work that I can reflect on, and that I have confidence from that, which you don't have when you're starting out and you're young and you're learning, and sometimes learning is very difficult, particularly with computer programming. A lot of people get frustrated by it and quit, and the frustration doesn't necessarily go away. You just get used to it, and you build confidence, and you figure out how to solve your own problems. So I would tell myself a bit of advice that the Woolgrammer's Kendall Bird actually told me as her advice when I asked her what her advice was, and that was act like it's impossible to fail. Because if you do that, then all of your doubts, your self-doubts, and your self-confidence, your self-confidence will be boosted and your doubts will go away. And if you just ignore everything else and just trudge ahead and get through it, then you'll not only be able to accomplish something much faster, but you'll have this confidence to see you through.
Confidence is one of those things that kind of builds over time. And I love the advice of acting like you can't fail, because I think oftentimes when girls in particular are considering things like engineering, oftentimes their self-doubt keeps them from pursuing opportunities. Would you guys agree?
Yes, definitely. I think that something I went through when I was applying for graduate school was I I wanted to apply to these schools, and then I kept second guessing, should I apply here? Should I apply there? I don't know. And then at some point I just told myself, like, it's not my choice to decide if I get a scholarship or if I get into school. Luckily, that's somebody else's job to figure out. And all I can do is put my best self forward and then just leave the rest up to, these like committees. So yeah, I think just like believing in yourself and not getting too wrapped up in that is a really great skill to foster. And it's totally necessary. And like, if you want to be successful in anything you do.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why I was really compelled to have you guys on as guests, is because you guys are telling the stories of so many women who believed in themselves and put their best foot forward and let, kind of the fates kind of dictate what happened after, but they were at least putting themselves in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
So what gets you guys up in the morning? I guess there's two ways that you can answer that. You can answer it from the perspective of at Facebook, or you could also talk about it in respect to WoGrammar.
I was trying to think, that's such a good question. What gets me motivated? Actually, honestly, it's neither. It's neither Facebook nor WoGrammar, though I absolutely love what I do at WoGrammar and I absolutely love what I do at Facebook. I think every single day I want to get up and do the best that I possibly can and like challenge myself and grow as a person. And I tend to do that through my work at Facebook and WoGrammar. I absolutely love meeting women engineers and talking to them about their stories and highlighting those stories, sharing it with the world, because when I meet these engineers and I talk to them, I'm so inspired and I feel like I just want everybody to know how cool they are and like how engineering isn't like this, this the stereotype that is out there. Like, so for me, it's more like how I want to grow and contribute to the world and like challenge myself. And I tend to do that through Facebook and WoGrammar. I don't know if that like answers your question, but I think that's what motivates me every single day.
Erin, is there anything that you would add to that, or you want to talk about what keeps you up at night?
Well, my first reaction to both of those is I'm like 8 months pregnant, so uncomfortableness both keeps me up at night and wakes me up in the morning. But motivationally, what keeps me up at night and makes me what I think about at night and what I think about in the morning when I wake up is very similar. It's really empowering to be able to empower these women through WoGrammar and also like through that, and then also in my day-to-day job at Facebook, empowering pages to connect with the wider audience through advertising. So I think both of those fulfill like a purpose of just being able to make a difference in the world.
I've been talking a lot about legacy, and I'm struck by the legacy that you guys are leaving. Is you are really helping people leave a trace in the world that they were here and they contributed by the work that you're doing at WoGrammar. And I think that the other piece that I was really kind of struck by is you are also letting little girls around the world through your interviews know that they can be whatever they see in the media also.
Yeah, I think something that I don't think this is necessarily female specific, but people don't tend to like to brag about themselves, but they don't mind if but they enjoy other people noticing their accomplishments. So something that we can do through WoGrammar is we can call attention to these amazing women in a way that they're also comfortable about it. And then it's really great to see their communities support them, their families, their networks, their schools, and just to see people say things like, oh, I had no idea that you did this, or to just like one of our WoGrammers, Kaya, was just featured on Black Girls Rock on BET and was like awarded by Michelle Obama. And just to be able to like see them grow and to see them like continue on and have influence. And we interviewed two other WoGrammers, Leah McGowan-Hare and Alona Bodnar, and Leah actually ended up serving as a judge on Alona's Make-a-thon committee for this hackathon make-a-thon she had, and so it's really cool to see these secondary sort of connections that come out of WoGrammar.
What's changing in you guys' industry that someone who is just getting started needs to be aware of?
I mean, there are lots of things. Like one glaring, like obvious fact is like that by 2020, which is not that far away, in the next 5 years, there are going to be about 2 million software engineering jobs, but only about 400,000 people graduating to fulfill this position. So there's going to be a high demand for this vocation, and it's a great time to be in software engineering. Also, now more than ever, we have tools in social media and otherwise on the internet that didn't exist 10 years ago. So we can really leverage those platforms to have impact on the world. And so there's another reason to be in software engineering is because we have these tools, we have this platform that we didn't have before to build on top of and reach like millions of people at a time. Another thing that I think is changing slowly is the stereotype, and WoGrammar is contributing to that by talking a lot about what it really means to be an engineer, and hopefully get the media to also talk a little bit more about how diverse this field is and how amazing the opportunities are within this field. So I think there's a lot, especially in the next 5 to 10 years.
Why do you think that being a software engineer is on the list?
I think it's because it's just so scalable and so impactful. I know the word scale gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's really true in software engineering is like you can build something that all you need is a laptop, really. And now you have all the tools to go out and build something that'll reach millions of people. We've never had that kind of power to say in any kind of vocation before. Most people, even in their lifetime, don't get to like work on something that'll reach so many millions of people. And now you can just have an internship at a company and be building product for 1 million, 10 million at Facebook, over 1 billion people.
So can I step back for a second? So is a software engineer like one of the applications are people who build apps, or is it a little bit more expansive than perhaps I have in my mind?
Sure. For a software engineer, the skills I would say they need to have, or they need to know how to program in some type of language. And what you can accomplish with being able to write code is that you can build many things. You can build apps, you can build websites, you can support databases, you can be a data scientist to trying to uncover trends in data, to answer interesting business questions or sociological questions. You can support just like networking with other computers, like really heavy infrastructure stuff. You can build computers from scratch, do really low-level programming with devices. So it's pretty vast. It's not just coding for apps or websites.
Erin was also a scientist at NASA, and so you could also use software engineering to send men to the moon.
Yeah, you can program spaceships, cars, anything that has a computer.
Well, that's another reason why I like you guys. My husband used to work at NASA too, so I definitely understand the power of that. So, ladies, I just really wanted to have you take a couple of minutes and tell us a little bit more about WoGrammar, what you're up to, what kind of impact we can expect you guys to have with WoGrammar and the future.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, WoGrammar, our goal is to break stereotypes one story at a time. We interview women engineers all over the world in all different types of industries, and we tell their stories about the things that they've built that they're proud of, how they learned to code or how they got into engineering, advice that they have to other women who would like to get into their field, and how they overcome challenges. And we focus on their technical accomplishments. And as far as the future, we have some exciting blog posts coming up that we'll put on Medium about lessons learned. We've interviewed over 50 women for WoGrammar, and we're aggregating that data, and we are going to share some of the things that we've learned at scale with those women, like aggregating the advice, for example.
Absolutely. That sounds great. So do you have any final thoughts, Zainab, that you'd like to share with our audience, please?
I would say, just believe in yourself and follow your passion. Just like Erin said, go out there and believe in yourself, give it your best, and then you see what happens.
Absolutely. Erin, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that Zainab put it well, and like I said, act like it's impossible to fail, and just be bold.
Absolutely. So if somebody wanted to get more information about the both of you, how would they reach out to you? Through WoGrammar?
Yes, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Medium, Instagram. Handle is Wogrammar. So please check it out. If you have any suggestions, recommendations on stories we could feature, email us at wogrammar@gmail.com.
All right. Ladies, it has been tremendous from my perspective. Thank you very, very much. I am going to share this with my daughters who are going to be going to their first programming class, so I'm really delighted. We'll be up in the Bay Area later on this year, so thank you for your time and attention. And for our listeners, we invite you to keep coming back to listen to more people like the ladies from Wogrammar who've got valuable information to share. Thank you for being on my podcast, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
And with that, we say good night.
Thank you for listening to today's edition of the Career 100 podcast. If you would like more information about planning and saving for college, please visit our site at www.collegefundingresource.com. That's www.collegefundingresource.com. This is Kathy Davis for the Career 100 podcast.